here at NABI, North American Honeybee Expo 2024. I'm with Greg Rogers, who is a beekeeper from, you're the Asheville area.
Asheville, North Carolina, yep.
Asheville, North Carolina. I took my wife to the Biltmore for our 10-year anniversary.
Right.
A year or two ago. I should remember when that is. But we were real close to you, and
Yes,
I didn't know it, or I would have tried to visit.
Next time you will.
Yeah, I'll have to do that.
One of my bee yards sits half a mile from one border of the Biltmore estate, so yeah,
we were really
I'm right
close.
there. Yeah.
So you've been, when did you start beekeeping?
1982, so this will be 42 years this year.
And how long have you been
time.
a full-time beekeeper?
So for the first 17 years, that 42 years, about 17 years, started it as a small hobby, and I had a small construction, carpentry, remodeling type business, and I did that for 17 years while slowly building up the bee business as a side business. So I was actually running two businesses. Got up to probably 150 to 200 hives while still doing that as a business. And then at some point I had just sort of this decision point as to one or the other, and I almost quit beekeeping and sold out. I got very close. I was right on the fence about which way to go, and then then I made the decision and went ahead and went to beekeeping full time. And I'm just so thankful that I made that decision. But it was interesting, people have asked, how do you do it with juggling with a job and all that sort of thing? And I think part of the reason it worked so well was that what I was doing was a small business.
Yeah.
On my own, it was my own small business. I was making my own hours, so that helped in terms. It would have been very difficult to do it with a straight job, a straight 9-to-5 job. Plus, I had the experience of knowing how to work hard outside, know how to work for myself, know how to make it work and make it profitable. I was doing it in two different things all at once.
I think those two would work pretty well together. I mean, you can take on a kitchen remodel, or you can say, I don't have time for it right now. It's May.
Exactly. And I worked with one other guy, and he was also real flexible. And I would say, when it got to maybe May or June, I'd say, I'm going to just take off for a month or so and go get caught up on the bees. And we were the kind of small business where we only did one job at a time, so we always had another job waiting, always. And once the friends, they saw what we had just done, and so we'd say, okay, well, I'm willing to do that, but it might be a month or two before we can start, because I have some bee work to do. So that was very helpful. And I had a woodworking shop with a table saw and all that sort of thing that I was using to help make stuff on the job site. So then, easy to make bee equipment.
Yeah, exactly.
And I would buy some of the stuff. I would buy, the frames. Obviously, there was no point in making frames, but maybe I would make covers and bottom boards, try to save some money, and did it that way. And then my philosophy with the beekeeping at that point was I started slowly. I jumped really quickly to 10 beehives, and then I hit 10, and I went, whoa, wait a minute. I said, wow, this is okay. There's some stuff to learn here, and this is pre-mites. We hadn't gotten the mites yet, and I got 10, and I stayed at 10 for probably at least 6 or 7 years. 5, 6, 7 years, somewhere in there. I stayed at 10, and then I sort of got my legs under me and began to understand what it was like and what it was, and then I took off from there. I got the knowledge. I joined the local bee club. I found 2 or 3 older beekeepers who I could ask anything to anytime, and worked with them and just started asking questions. Got real involved.
You spent years building competency.
Yes.
And then you started building into a sideline.
Yeah.
And then in 97, 99, 2000, somewhere in there, you jumped into full time.
Yeah.
So you had 150, 200 colonies at that point. What did you do when you went full time? Did you immediately jump to 300?
Over 3 or 4 years, I ramped it on up.
So you built up from a couple hundred up to about 300, 350, and you've been pretty stable there?
And then I got up to about 400, and then now I'm starting to back off just a little bit. I just turned 65 this year, and my wife retired. And so it's time to start backing down a little bit, and that's also why I got an interest in doing some research this year.
your operation, you're running 300, 350 colonies year after year.
Yep.
What do you peak at? Like, how many nukes do you make? How many nukes do you keep? How many hives do you have to replace?
So I don't sell much, and I've never really gotten so much into the business of selling bees from the beginning.
So you don't sell a lot of nukes?
No, from the beginning, what my business concentrated on was we're in a great area for honey production. I know not everywhere is as good, but where we are, we get two distinct honey flows.
You get the early spring.
We get the spring.
Tulip poplar, black locust.
And wild blackberries.
Blackberries.
That's our spring, and then we get a little bit of a lull in June, and then we get a second honey flow in late June and most of July, which is sourwood and sumac.
Yeah.
So we have two beautiful. It varies, of course, tremendously from year to year, but rarely do you get two great flows, but pretty much every year you're going to get something on both of the honey flows. I live in a great area in terms of selling honey.
Yeah.
You've been there. You've been to the Biltmore House. We're a tourist mecca. We have a fairly large population now. The county that I live in is approaching 300,000 people, but yet we're in the middle of the mountains and all this rural area. So we have this big tourist tradition. And then as it turns out also in the next county over is the biggest apple growing county in the state of North Carolina. And it used to be it's Henderson County, and it used to be about 8,000 acres of apples. So I kind of put it together. I was scared of the apple pollination at first, and then I gradually worked my way into it because I was just scared I was going to get sprayed and have the beehives killed.
Let me interject just for a second. So you covered something I want to bring more attention to. You've got a county with a lot of people in it, 300,000 people.
Yes.
It's a tourist attraction as well.
Yep.
But all those people are concentrated in the rare flat areas and in the valleys because it's so mountainous that there's just ground that you cannot do anything with. It's not economical to do anything with. So you've got these wide swaths of mountains forested and wild, and are great for bees.
Yep.
And then you've also got a great market to sell the honey
the same
to.
place.
So that's a rare combination.
Yes.
You know, a lot of places that are urbanized, you know, people will have acre lots and stuff like that, and you're not getting that. If people are concentrated, and you've got room for bees too, so it's a great market.
Or I go down to South Georgia I also buy some honey. I got to the point where actually I had all my honey, and then I would actually buy some bulk honey too, just to get through some of my accounts where I couldn't make it for the whole year. So I buy honey from South Georgia, and you go down there, and it's one of the world's premier places to produce honey.
Yeah,
is South Georgia and North Florida. Incredible what they can produce, and yet it's very rural, and there's not a great market for their honey. So they can produce these massive amounts of honey, and then they generally sell it all in 55-gallon drums just because they have to.
They don't have the market there to sell local honey.
So I had that, plus the apples, and I was sort of cautious at first, got into the apple pollination, stuck my toe in to see, you know, are my hives going to get killed, because they spray right up to when you bring the bees in, and then they're spraying pesticides the minute you leave. And I thought I really want to be careful, and got into it, and then I got all the way up to where I was taking almost 300 hives to pollinate the apples every year. And then I finally retired from that about 3 or 4 years ago. So that was my business, was honey plus the pollination plus buying some bulk honey. And when you piece together those parts.
What was an apple contract like?
It was.
What were they paying per colony?
At the beginning, when I started, it was $35 or $40 probably a hive, and then at the end, and now it's around $100 now. That's a typical price now.
How long do you move into apples for? Is it like 2 weeks?
You're there for basically 3 weeks. 3 weeks. Pretty close to that. And in all that, and interestingly, in all that time, in 30 years, I never had a single bad bee kill in any orchard. And often what'll get you, it's not the person that's renting your bees, it's the orchard next door that didn't rent any bees and don't care. And even with that, I would see a small handful of bees in front of hives, but I never had one serious bee kill. So I finally relaxed got into it and just started doing it on a larger scale. And
what was the biggest problem with pollinating? Was it swarming bees in the orchards, or moving them?
Moving them, hands down. People,
just a big
always
pain.
tell you the least fun thing to do in beekeeping is moving bees. Hands down, nothing else comes close.
Hard on you.
It's just hard work, hard on the bees. You have to go no matter what the weather is. The growers, I would always tell growers, I need 48 hours notice. But when I go in, I need 48 hours. Don't do any of this last minute. Come get them right now. They were respectful of that. But even with that, you've got all the weather to contend with. If you get 4 straight days of rain and all the roads turn to mud, so what? You got to get in and do it and get them out. And then your bee yards you're taking them back to, same problem. All the mud, all the dirt.
You go to apples early. That's when did apples
April.
bloom?
It's basically
April.
It was the month of April.
Okay, and then your flow is going to start May 1st.
Immediately, right? Yeah, the last week of April, 1st of May, 1st. Right? And they were often, the poplars were even starting to bloom.
Yeah, when you pull it out of apples.
When you're pulling out of apples, right?
So, what is your average honey production per colony just an average?
100 pounds or so, probably.
Is that in the spring flow and
that would be kind of all together, and it would highly variable from year to year. You might get some years where it's 150 or more, and then other years where it was more poor. And it's highly, as you know, it's highly variable.
Do you mostly wholesale your honey, or do you retail it?
Mostly, what I do is put it in bottle it in jars, label it, and sell it wholesale to stores. So it's it's a natural food store. We have lots of course, with all the apples and vegetables and all the people, there's lots of roadside produce stands, there's apple stands, there's half a dozen natural food stores.
Do you deliver?
And I deliver.
You do it all?
I do it all. I deliver. I have almost no employee, in terms of paid help in a year, I probably don't pay out $1,000. I'm the classic. I was just talking to Troy Hall. We're the classic model. If you go back 150 years in beekeeping, look at the bee books. The classic model is that 300 to 500 beehive operation where you do almost all the work yourself. You hire very little help, and people say, you can really make a living doing that? I say, yeah, you really can. This model's been around a long time. I love Bob Benny's my dear friend, and I love watching his videos. And you think about his scale, and he has 20 or 30 employees running around, and when it's a rainy day, they all come out of the field and they're working in the factory, and you just go, wow, it's really fun to watch. And then
it takes a special person to run his operation.
How can he organize that and keep all that running and do it? And I have no interest in doing that. It's none, zero. And so I'm that older model of doing it mostly all by yourself.
So what does your honey retail for in that market?
It's all over the place.
So if you pull a sourwood varietal, that's probably going to be top of the market, right?
It's going to retail at $12 or $15 a pound probably now. The problem is where we are, it's a huge honey producing area. It's a huge tourist area. And so our problem is there's also a huge amount of really crummy honey that's not from there. Okay. So all the funny honey, all the honey, some of which is obviously adulterated and counterfeit. So we have a big state farmers market where literally tractor trailer loads are coming in to the market from some of these packers that are packing this foreign honey. And so there we are, thrown into the mix, all trying to compete with that.
Just so people will have context, Blake Shook gave a talk in Orlando, and he said, I can have honey from India landed on a dock in the U.S. for 80 cents a pound.
Yep. So
80 cents a pound.
We sort of compete with that, and we sort of don't, and people are, every now and then the bee club, they're all up in arms. How are we going to stop this? What do we got to do? We got to talk to the authorities. We got to get them to do something. And I have the same message I've given people down through the years over and over and over. They were doing that 100 years ago. If you look back actually in history, pick up a bee book 100 years ago, it was the same thing was happening.
Well, there's so much.
It's no different.
If you're a packer and you can get a product, even if you cut yours with it, and it's 80 cents a pound, and you can put 51% yours and 49% that, you just doubled your inventory at a very low cost.
And you look
there's profit motive
Yes.
to do that, and if you've got loose morals,
Yes.
there's a lot of people who will do that.
And 100 years ago, if you look in the books, comb honey took off because people didn't trust bottled honey.
Yeah.
It was being adulterated with just regular sugar syrup, and they stopped trusting the bottled honey. And then the comb honey took off. You read it in the books, and you just go, oh, well, you read it and you go, this is just like today.
Yeah.
Only it's China or whatever is the new thing, but it's no different.
No new thing under the sun.
No new thing under the sun. So people say, well, what are we going to do then? And so the same thing, I've said it over and over for 40 years. I said, look, this is how to do it, because I've done it for so long. Produce a good product, produce your honey, come up with a container that you like, and come up with an attractive label. Don't necessarily just use a stock label from a catalog. Try to come up with a nice, attractive label that when they look at your honey, you've done it with your honey, they look at that honey, the label, and they'll remember it. It'll just be a little distinctive, and they'll remember it. They'll buy a bottle of your honey and have your name on it, and have, produced and packed by, so that they know that, or something like that, where they know that you're the real thing. Participate if there's any kind of a state program with a state certification or whatever. Participate in that. I participate in one of those. Put your honey out there for sale. Okay, stay with your label. Don't go jumping around changing your label.
Yeah.
Pick a label that you like. I tried a couple, and then I finally settled on one, and now I've used the same label for 30 years. A label that people can familiarize themselves with. They'll buy your honey. Okay. They'll go buy that other honey. Well, let's just say the funny honey. And they'll taste the funny honey, and they'll go,
there's something off with this.
There's something off with this. That I've heard this over and over. They'll taste your honey, and they'll say, wow. I've heard people say over and over, that's the best honey I've ever tasted. So guess what? When they come back, even if they're a tourist, and they come back next year and they're looking, and they're going to see that jar, and they're going to say, that's the one I bought last year. That's good honey. And they're going to buy it, and they're going to buy it year after year after year. And I tell people, that's all you can do. You can't stop the you can't stop the bad honey. No one's ever figured out how to.
You outcompete it. You don't.
That's all you can do.
And I'm following that same model where I don't want to have 10,000 colonies and a bunch of employees. I want to have an operation I can do myself. It's just so good for me and good for everybody around me. It's good for me physically, spiritually, mentally. Keeps me in shape. It's challenging. You have to learn things all the time.
All those.
But the only way that you can do it on a scale like this, I think, the only way that you can do it is if you own your brand and people trust your brand and they're buying your honey because it's your honey.
Right. And
they trust that. And then you can also get into some other things like nuke sales and be a broodstock producer like Corey Stevens does. And
or if you're in a more rural area than I am, I'm
an hour from Nashville.
So that's close. So you might have to sell more nukes or bees or queens or something, to make up the difference. If you can't quite make it as much from honey, you'll have to balance
in an average year, I've got about the same. I'll make about 100 pounds per colony in a decent year. Last year was poor. It was mediocre, I'll say. It was about 80 pounds a colony. And it wasn't a good year. But I just don't get the sourwood. I don't have the elevation. We've got sourwood trees, but I don't have the elevation to get the crop.
Yeah.
So we do get some sourwood. I can taste it in the comb, but it gets mixed every year.
The two biggest mistakes, and I'll say two, the two biggest mistakes I've seen people make in trying to, grow up a bee business and everything, and I tell this over and over, don't get too big too fast.
Yeah.
Because when you're now, somebody like Bob Benny or other people I've met who went and worked for a commercial beekeeper for a year and really learned kind of what it was like, I've seen some of them able to just jump right in and grow really quickly. I just talked to a friend of mine who I just saw here at the fair, and he did that. Essentially, he went and worked for a year commercial, and then he came back from that, and he's quickly ramped up to 200 hives, but he knows what he's doing. And Bob did exactly the same thing. And so, but for the most part, for most people that don't have access to that, start small and stay small for at least the first 5 to 10 years, because you have no idea what you don't know.
Yeah.
You're getting started and you don't know. And the second thing would be I would say strongly, don't borrow money to do beekeeping.
You cannot grow fast without borrowing money, because you're not going to have the cash flow. And there's such a lag. I make a nuke this year, they might make honey next year. Yeah. There's such a lag in that. So.
And I've seen that mistake before several times. I'm not just saying that. I've seen people do it, run up a bunch of debt on the credit card or whatever, get a whole lot of hives, and I would just go, why? Why are you getting all these hives when, you really don't know how to manage what you already have? And my best mentor, I watched him. He had 400 beehives. He had built up over many years. He had 400 beehives, though he had actually gone and worked with a commercial beekeeper. At those 400 beehives, he didn't have 3 swarms in a spring from those 4. He was managing those 400 hives so closely. He was equalizing, he was splitting, he was, managing those bees where they didn't swarm. He knew what to do on those bees to make them incredibly productive. And so that's the trick, is if you have 10 hives, I've often told people, if you have 10 hives, you can intensively and properly manage 10 hives, and you can easily outproduce somebody who has 40 to 50 hives with 10 hives. I'll have people show up at the bee club and they'll say, I have 40 hives and I've had 70 swarms. And I'll say, that's interesting. So why do you have 40 beehives? If you've allowed 70 swarms, first of all, you haven't produced hardly anything. Maybe you just love having 40 beehives, but I could take your same 40 beehives and just give me 10 of them, and I could manage them properly where they didn't swarm, equalize, make splits, get them to just the right stage right before the honey flow, just the right number of frames of brood, bees. I know what it needs to be, where they're just right at that edge of swarming, and then the honey flow starts and they give up the swarm impulse. And I can make more honey from those 10 hives than you can from the 40 or 50 that you've had swarm. Also, you have all the money investment in 50 hives, where I only had the money investment in 10 hives. You have all the treatment of all the 50 hives you're going to have to do, the feeding that you're going to have to do. So now you're digging your hole even deeper. Yeah. And if you had 10 hives that were highly productive, the only way you're going to learn how to make those 10 hives that productive is you're going to take the time slowly to learn how to be a beekeeper. So that's really the strategy that I tell people over and over.
What about, let's talk about